Yeah. Yeah. So how's it going, man? What's been up since the last time I had you on? I know you've been busy.
Oh man, it's been a whirlwind. Gosh, we were middle of pandemic last time, weren't we?
Yeah, it was right when the book was coming out is when I had
Yeah,
you on.
that's right. Well, we broke ground on new facilities, and on the 15th, we moved all our cows up there. So it's been the longest year and a half, 2 years of my life.
I
It's just,
imagine.
I, you know, all things considered, between supply chain issues and everything else, it's gone pretty smoothly. But like not being able to get the breaker boxes for power to actually run the barns and the milking facilities, things like that are stressful. Or the fact that my generator, in case we lose power, isn't going to be here till July, which means I'm going to be renting one all winter because I'm sure as heck not going to have one.
What
Other
is
things
the
like that.
Yeah, what is the winter like there in Oregon? Does it get pretty cold?
Right here on the coast, it's not bad. We can dip down below freezing, but we get about 100 inches of rain, and we can get 100, 115 mile an hour winds coming off the ocean
Jeez.
sometimes. So
Yeah.
sometimes we'll go a week without power because the main lines to the coast get just obliterated. So it's not, if you have a dairy or a business, you have to have alternative power sources, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, you're on the West Coast, so you guys are going to be running off of nothing but wind and solar soon, right? I mean, aren't you going to do the California way and do it like
You
that?
know, I ironically, here in Oregon, we are already extremely sustainable with all the hydroelectric dams, but they don't
Mm,
count those because they are pre the new green energy bills that were passed. So none of that actually gets counted towards the green energy.
that's
So
weird.
isn't that weird how that works?
Yeah. Yeah. So, all right. You are, for those listening who are new since the last time Derrick came on, you're a dairy farmer, I believe, fourth generation dairy farmer in Oregon. You're part of the
Yep.
Tillamook collective of dairy farmers. So if
Hmm.
people have had the ice cream or cheese or whatever from Tillamook, chances are they've eaten something from one of your cows, right?
Correct. Yep.
So you mentioned you just built a big new facility since the last time we spoke. Can you give me a little more detail on that? Like, what's the scale of your operation?
So we're milking 500. We will, once we're
Jeez.
fully operational, we will be at 1,200 cows. And that sounds like a lot of cows. And for our area, it'll put me in my county in the top 10 dairies. But nationally, I'd still be one of the small farms. Um, there's roughly 9.5 million total cattle, dairy cattle in the United States. So I'm still just a drop in the bucket. The facilities, though, state of the art. Cows will have RFID tags. I'll have daily milk weights, activity monitoring, rumination monitoring. So as soon as if a cow's getting sick, I will know before any outward signs. I mean, the technology that is available for cows is phenomenal these days.
Wow. So they're gonna have like a little whoop strap, and you can see how they're doing, basically.
Yeah, that they'll have a little button in their ear for in the parlor, and my sort gate reads that, and if I need to catch a cow, it automatically kicks her into a holding area after being milked. And then they will have basically their Fitbits, but they go around their neck
Yeah.
on a
Yeah.
collar, and it will keep the technology is just this close to where I will be able to have goggles. And if I'm walking in the barn, it'll pop up cow numbers. I will be able to tap, and it'll bring up all her data. It is so close to being ready. I'm excited.
Yeah. That's wild, man. So obviously, with the advent of all of this really cool technology, the the process in some ways to outside observers might seem a little less a little less warm, a little more cold, right? Because it's all automated and all of this stuff. And I know
Hmm.
you probably know where I'm going with this, but you catch a lot of BS online from animal rights people, vegans, just all.
Hmm.
And dude, some of my favorite stuff on social media is watching you reply back to some of these haters. Can you just like, for those who have no clue what it's like in a conventional like dairy operation, because I think a lot of people they picture this insane, machinery everywhere, like tentacles coming off the cow, from their teats and all this stuff. Like what does that look like? Can you paint like a picture for people who have no clue?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give a day in the life of a cow. So my cows, we are going to be a freestall operation. That means they are in these barns and they have stalls that they can lay in, but they are also able to walk around in the barns. They can walk and get food, water whenever they want. And we design the barns so that it is extremely comfortable for them. And so that's while they're in their milking cycle. They milk for 10 months out of the year and they get 2 months a year off, like vacation, while they're at the end of their pregnancy. While they're at the end of their pregnancy, they will be, if it's not raining and nasty outside, they'll be out grazing out on pasture. And then once they calve in, they come back. So while they're in the milking herd, roughly 22 hours out of the day, they are just doing their thing in freestall barns, relaxing. Uh, Twice a day, they will make the short trip about 100 feet away to the milking facility. And we are putting in what's called a rotary. It's kind of like a carousel.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, they walk on, they do one round around. It takes 15 minutes to get around on the rotary. And while they're on there, the guys have put the machine on. As they're about to get off, I have a robot that will apply a post dip sanitizing spray to make sure that they are protected as they're walking back out, because this is getting a little in the weeds, but right after milking, the teat ends are their most susceptible to foreign bacteria,
Mm.
obviously, because they have been milked. So by putting a nice little barrier on there, it protects the cows from things like mastitis. And then from there, they will head back out and go about being cows again. Cows spend about 11 to 12 hours a day just laying down, chewing their cud. Uh, for those of you that don't know what a cud is, it's a hard plate, not hard, it's a squishy plate in their mouth where they regurgitate food. That's very cute. And they rechew it because they are a ruminant. And so they have to break down feed or their food to tiny particles so that it can go into the rumen and their gut bacteria can break it down. Um, and so that's what they do. They're very chill. You can walk out into the herd with my girls and they will surround you, follow you around, and generally be a nuisance because they're like, oh, there's a human in here. Interesting. Um, Very easy, very happy cows. Um, that's the life of a dairy cow on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I think it's important to talk about that because people have this misconception of what that must be like, and any chance I get, I like to shine light on that because. So I grew up. I think we might have talked about this last episode, but my grandfather was a grain bin operator, and so I spent
Mm-hmm.
every day at the grain bin after school for years. That was just where I hung out with farmers, and most of them were just growing crops, but we definitely had some guys who had cattle and everything else that came through and kind of did both, and just talking to those guys about their day to day lives and what it's like. There were so many things that were obvious to me that were misconceptions that the general population has about what it means to be a modern farmer. Um,
Right.
to that end, one thing that I was thinking about while you were describing that is since you have been, gosh, I think you told me you guys have been on that land for like 105 years or something last time, close to that.
Yeah, it's right there. Yeah.
what has changed since you were a wee lad growing up on the dairy farm versus now?
Oh, there's so much that has changed. Obviously the technology. When I was growing up, we didn't have robots. We didn't have all the activity monitoring or anything like that. But on top of that, dairy cattle nutrition. My cows have a nutritionist. They eat better than I do.
Right.
It's balanced to the micronutrient for them. Our nutritionist comes in and samples the feeds we're feeding to make sure that, well, this load doesn't have exactly what normally has in it, so we need to readjust your ration, Derrick. Um, from that to the technology advancements in artificial insemination, um, we no longer actually run a bull on the farm because we have access to the best genetics throughout the world, which allows us to breed a better cow, a healthier cow, produces more milk, which makes it so we can milk less cows and have more total volume of milk. That's why you see milk production increasing year on year in the United States and cow numbers are declining. And then you'll see an activist say, "Oh, see, you guys are all going out of business because there's less cows." And it's like, no, we've just gotten so much more efficient that we don't need as many cattle to produce more milk,
Right.
which makes
Which
us
is
more sustainable,
right.
honestly.
Exactly. Well, especially if you subscribe to the cow farts and methane narrative, right? So,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's uh, it's so ridiculous. I just read an article, and this isn't anything to do with cows, but up in Washington State, they have some backroom deal to set aside some forestry land to offset carbon emissions, and they didn't involve the forestry department up there or anything like that. And the company that's doing it with the state of Washington is owned by BP Oil. So it's just like, ugh. But they're more sustainable this way.
right.
Just
Yeah. Yeah, man, it's wild. There's a lot going on in the world that I think you have a unique perspective on being a farmer. And going into this, there were several things that were coming to mind when I was driving over to the studio that I'd love to talk to you about. I mean, obviously, and I think you covered this with Dan Holloway a little bit. It's been a while since I listened to your episode with him, but the acquisition of massive swaths of farmland by foreign operators and
mhm.
large sort of globalist billionaires is something that I think a lot of Americans are concerned with. Is that something that you, as a farmer, when you look at the fact that they're specifically buying up farmland, do you think that's something to be concerned with, or is that just
uh, I so that there's always nuance here.
sure?
I always like to see farmland stay local, um, and I do not like foreign entities owning farmland. And I don't care
Especially
if it's
China.
China or honestly, I don't care what government it is, or
I
it should
agree.
stay owned by United States citizens. Ch- China owns the largest pork packing plant conglomerate in the country.
That's Smithfield,
I
right?
Yeah, and I don't know how that gets allowed to go through. It doesn't make sense to have a foreign uh, entity owning that amount of infrastructure in the United States. Um, as far as billionaires, we we're talking about Bill Gates. Everybody knows who we're talking about. He doesn't. He owns like 200 and something thousand acres, and yeah, he's buying up more land. There is, I think, 900 million acres of farmland in the United States. So he's got a long way to go before he has um, a whole lot of control. Um, and there was just an acquisition of estate, the Easterday estate in Washington and Oregon. Um, that was he got outbid by the Mormon Church. So big entities are always going to be buying up properties, It's just that's why I say buy local, support local, small time farmers if you can, but also if you're buying meat or dairy at a supermarket, that's safe too. If you don't have access to local ranchers and things like that, supermarket meat and dairy is completely safe and nutritious, and don't be afraid to buy there either.
What is your take on raw milk? Because there's a big raw milk push. You know, people who advocate
So,
what primal sort of eating and stuff like that are big on raw milk.
yeah. So when people ask me about raw milk, I drink from my dairy raw milk, but I'm also exposed to all the bacteria that could potentially be in that
Mm,
milk because I'm out with the cows. I mean, my pants are covered in cow manure right now. I'm not, the risk for me is not that it's, I'm willing to take it. Um, if I was not exposed to this stuff, I would not buy raw milk. But what I would suggest is to go find somebody that's doing non-homogenized pasteurized milk, because I think a lot of people don't understand that store-bought milk, the majority of it not only goes through pasteurization, but it also goes through the homogenization process, which is where they break up the fat particles, and that's why you don't see cream rise to the top in
right.
store-bought milk. And if you've ever had cream line milk, is what a lot of people call it, it is so much better because you have that creamy taste as you're starting out. And there is a ton of small dairies near population centers that are producing cream line milk, bottling it themselves. There's actually home delivery services that are popping back up because a lot of people are trying to get back in touch with actual farmers, which is great. It's
Well,
great. And
I
it's
want.
really good for small time farmers. So raw milk, there's a reason we went to pasteurization. It was something like 90% of all foodborne illnesses were from raw milk.
Wow.
Have our sanitation practices gotten better and things like that? Absolutely. Refrigeration, that also helps. But we pasteurize orange juice, apple juice, all that, those juices too, for the same reason. It just makes it a much safer product.
Yeah. When you talk about homogenization and the cream line milk, is that, this might be an ignorant question, but is that the curds and whey that you hear from, you know, the song or whatever?
No, curds and whey is actually the cheese making process.
Oh, okay. Makes
So
sense.
the
Got it.
curds are what goes and gets pressed into cheese, and the whey is the uh, fluid waste product from the making of cheese, which goes through a dryer, and then that's how you get your whey proteins and things like that that bodybuilders will use.
Right. Yeah. I I have always been curious about that because it is like it's a waste byproduct, but it does make a great, you
Mhm.
know, fast absorbing protein source. So is that with your cows? What is the, so do you have any say in that process, or is it sort of further downstream once you, I guess, do you get to decide what products come from your milk, or is it all sort of put into this collective of Tillamook
It just
farmers?
goes down to the milk silos and it all gets mixed together.
Got it. Okay.
With my cows being jerseys, they produce a higher butter fat, so I
Hmm.
guarantee you a lot of my milk is going towards ice cream, or at least the part of it, because you need excess fat to make ice cream.
God bless you.
I know.
Dude. Ice cream is one of those things that, like, health stuff aside, it just makes you happy, man. It just makes you
Yeah,
happy.
my daughter says that it's good for your soul, and
It is.
I have I have yet to find a reason to argue with her about that.
Yeah, I agree. Now, something else that people might be thinking, and I do want to talk about broader issues and stuff, but I am fascinated by your industry.
You're
Uh,
gonna have to come take a look at the new facilities once we're
I really need to, man. I need to. I know we said it last time. I need to get out there, but I would love to.
next year. Because
Yeah,
the next couple months it's going to be a whirlwind for me breaking into new facilities. So
dude, I believe it. I'd love to come out and bring my little girl and my wife, so they could see it. That would be phenomenal. Um,
absolutely, and the Tillamook Coast is gorgeous. So
yeah, yeah. Vacation ideas,
vacation.
absolutely. So you mentioned obviously the the pregnant cows are the ones that yield milk, right? Their gestation period is something like 10 months. Is that correct?
Nine
You
months.
said
Nope,
9 months, like
9 months.
ours.
Horses are 10 to 11 months.
Okay.
Cows are almost identical to humans. 9 months.
Okay. Got it. How many are sort of to have 500 who are pregnant, do you have a separate
So
population who are not?
so they start milking as soon as they have a calf, right?
Right.
There is a mandatory waiting period of 60 days before we will even think about breeding them back. A cow
Got
will
it.
start cycling 20 to 30 days after having a calf. And if there was a bull in the herd, by God, they'd be pregnant again, which makes sense because in nature, they would have a calf every spring.
Right. Yeah.
Common sense. So at 60 days, we start thinking about breeding them back. And then for 7 months after they get pregnant, they're still milking, they go dry so that they can put on that fat and that extra body weight to handle calving and having an influx of milk production again. Because a dairy cow for the first 60 to 90 days they are in a negative energy balance because they are producing milk. Any woman that has been pregnant and breastfed knows that by God you can drop weight in a hurry.
Hmm.
So same concept. And so that's why you really have to be on it with your nutritionist, making sure you're getting everything you can into them at calving and after calving.
So with that number of cow, you at any, I mean, I imagine it's a lot of freaking cows giving birth around the same time. That has to be one
Uh,
heck of a logistical.
no, because we spread it out throughout the year because we
Okay.
have we have calving pens there. It's all inside, so we're not trying to have calves at a certain time of year. We try and keep it steady.
Okay.
So two or three a day throughout the year. Once we're
Wow.
1,200 cows, it'll be a couple calves every day, so that
That's
you
wild.
constantly have cows calving in and cows going dry. So they are the milk weight in the tank stays about the same.
So you are, I mean, you have to have like full time staff who are
Oh yeah.
assisting cows in giving birth daily.
Yep. Yep.
That's wild.
We are running. We will be at 10 employees for the 1,200 cows. 10 employees plus myself, my wife, and my parents. So 14
Yeah.
total.
Wow. That's crazy. Just the thought of the fact that every day there's birth taking place, essentially.
Yeah, and this is one of the reasons you see a dairy is getting larger because I have the ability to have 10 employees. That way, my wife and I can have a life and actually go do things and have a vacation occasionally. Otherwise, I work every day if unless we go somewhere. Um, Hopefully, going forward, I'll be able to take a weekend off every once in a while. That's
Yeah.
I have lofty goals. I'd like to have a weekend off every once in a while.
Well, for a farmer, that is a lofty goal, man. As someone who grew up around a lot of farmers, it was, I mean, the hardest working people I've ever seen, and it's
Yeah.
funny because there's this hustle culture online. All these people talk about
Yeah.
the grind and all that stuff. And it's like, bro, you're not getting up at 3, 4 a.m. and working 15-hour days, like
Yeah, I laugh at those people. Yeah.
it's funny. It's funny. Um, so what happens to the calves? Obviously there's all these calves being generated. Is that
hmm So if it's a heifer, which it means female, they go and we have calf pens where because a lot of people don't understand that a calf is born basically without an immune system. They get
Mm.
all the stuff in the colostrum to kickstart their immune system. So we test all the colostrum to make sure it's high quality before we feed it to them. We have excess colostrum is stored in a freezer, so if we need it, we can heat it up and feed the calf. They start off in a individual pen, and then once they're on to a good start, they go into group housing and they're fed milk in group housing. And if it's a bull, which is the boy breed gender, um,
How many
we
genders of
actually
cow are there? Is it
there is
87 like
there
humans?
is only two. Yeah,
Good.
we
What
still only have two genders of cattle.
do they have
Um,
pronouns?
they do. I haven't asked them, so I guess I shouldn't assume.
You're so
Uh,
insensitive.
anyway, the bulls, we actually have a buyer that comes and buys the bulls because dairy farmers, we are in the business of making milk. And they take the bulls and they will go and they will castrate them. That's a fun thing.
Mm,
And they will raise them as steers for the beef side. And at 18 months to 2 years of age, depending on when they hit market weight, they will go and you'll see them as steak and hamburger, and they're delicious.
they are delicious. I enjoy eating them almost every day.
I try every day.
Yeah. So do you don't have any aspirations to do meat uh, in your future, or do
I'm
you?
not saying I'm not going to do that. I have played with it. I've got about 15 of my cows are bred to Wagyu, so they're probably going to stick around, and I might play with some direct to market beef because a little known fact about the Jersey breed, they are some of the best marbled animals you can
Mm,
get outside of Wagyu because they're
interesting.
distantly related if you go back far enough in the genealogy to the Wagyu breed.
So that the marbling that you see in Wagyu and even in the Jersey cows, that's genetic. That's not a result of some special diet or anything like that.
No, well, some of it's diet because if you're feeding to get fat, you're going to see a little more marbling in any cow's muscle,
Hmm.
but a lot of it's genetic. And the thing with Jersey cattle is they have a yellow fat. Uh,
Getting a
can you
call?
still hear me?
Yeah, I can still
Yeah,
hear
yeah.
you.
Okay, I'll just ignore the call. Um, and the yellow fat has more flavor.
Okay. Is that I don't know if I've ever seen a steak with yellow fat. Is that just not common for people
It's
to
not
do?
common because a lot of people see yellow fat and they think it's no good,
Hmm. Interesting.
and it's the exact opposite. It is.
Yeah. Man. So, okay, potentially in the future you could be doing that. Will the Jersey Wagyu cross have the yellow fat, or is
I'm
that
not
to be
sure.
determined?
That's
Okay.
that's something I'll have to find out. So which brings me on to the topic. People are probably wondering, well, why are you breeding some of your dairy cattle to Wagyu? Um, since we aren't well, right now, I'm growing my herd, but normally we don't aren't trying to grow our herd. The lower half of our herd we breed to beef because it makes their calves more desirable for the beef growers that are buying our calves, our uh, Jersey bulls, and so if they're a Jersey beef cross, they're worth more.
When you say beef, are you referring to Angus? Is that
Angus, Charolais,
okay?
yeah, those two are what we usually use.
Got it. Okay. It's fascinating to me, man, as a world that I'm not intimately familiar with, but at the same time, one that I participate in as a consumer every single
Daily.
day.
Yep.
Yeah. It's like that's one thing that is something I think about a lot is just how out of touch we as a species, humanity, have become with our natural environment. You know, if like how separated we are from our food is wild to me. And I mean, you see it all the time, especially in your comments and stuff. It's like
Yeah.
you're like, oh, I get my meat from the grocery store. I'm not. I could never Well, I guess that's more of a hunting sort of argument. You know, people are like, "How could you hunt? I just go to the grocery store." It's like you do realize that you're still that's still an animal that
Oh,
dies, right?
I still get that though, because they're like, how could you eat your own cows? You've raised them since they were calves. Well, yeah, you're right. I have. I also know exactly what that cow has or those cattle have eaten. I know how healthy they are,
Hmm.
and I've specifically raised them to be extremely well marbled and delicious. So, yes, I am going to eat them.
Have you ever gotten too attached to a particular cow?
Oh yeah, I've had a
Yeah.
few over the years. I mean, you have your pets that you hold on for too long, and there's, everybody seems to think that in life, a cow's end of life is like on a Disney movie where they just lay down in the meadow and they just peacefully go. Um, but any older cow, you can see that they start to have hip problems. They have
Mm.
problems getting up. And if you allow them to get to that point, it ends up with me having to euthanize the cow because otherwise they're going to get sores. Their quality of life is just not there.
Right.
So, and people don't seem to understand that it's easier on the cow to be utilized for beef and go to a slaughter plant than it is for them to spend 6 months deteriorating until the point where they get euthanized. That's
Yeah.
a waste of an animal. And so there's this disconnect of like, how can you do that to your cattle? And it's like, because I live in the real world and I see what it actually looks like at the end of their lives.
Hmm. Yeah, man. It's and in the context of hunting, that argument applies. But then it's even more, I guess. Uh, it's like okay, think of an elk or a deer. It's like they if they do make it to that elderly state and they're starting to deteriorate. I mean, they'll get picked off and eaten alive by a predator in
Yep.
no time. You know, it's like
Oh,
do
yeah.
you want them to be eaten ass first by a grizzly bear or to die instantly because of an arrow through their heart and to feed my family for 6 months? You know,
Yeah, exactly. Well, and then you look at the statistics that 50% of deer and elk don't make it to a year of age.
right?
That's
Yeah.
not an easy death on those uh, calves and fawns for deer and elk. That is being eaten by predators because they are a prey animal.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Nature is a brutal place to live, um, especially if you're a prey animal.
Yeah. And we have really gotten disconnected from that as a society, right? Like we just it's wild to me. And as a father, you know, I'm trying to raise my child in going out in the woods and taking her fishing and taking her hunting and all of these things and teaching her about life because man, it's just it's sad. Like I fish a lot. That's my main outdoor activity. I you know,
I've noticed.
catfish. Yeah, yeah. And I've caught fish at like more public lake accesses where there's kids around and it's like the first time they've ever seen a catfish in their life and they're like
Yeah.
losing their mind. And it's like, man, I grew up like this was a normal thing that we just as kids you're exposed to nature. You know, we were digging through ditches, catching crawfish and doing all this stuff and it's like it's wild to me that we've become so disconnected and I think one thing that people can do to go back to what you said is just find your local farmers and support them and go out there and I mean just going out there and your kid you know obviously if the farmer's okay with it a lot of them are you know take your kid out
Yeah.
there and they can see the farm and everything and it's just I think it's important, man.
Yeah. For example, I built a viewing area so that people can come watch the cows being milked.
That's cool.
And I have a 5-year plan where I'm going to be building a visitor center where you can come get a cup of coffee, maybe an ice cream if you're here later in the day, and you'll be able to go out and just walk in the freestyle barn, check and see what it is really like for cows to be in the barn and how comfortable it is. Um, and I'm right on a major highway from Portland. So, I mean, I'm not going to say this is all me just being nice. I see dollar signs from people going to the coast every day. So, why wouldn't I?
Yeah. Do you worry about with because obviously you are someone who has a very public profile. You've gained
Yeah.
a large following, and look, dude, there are some crazy people out there.
Oh, definitely.
Has anyone tried to actually visit the farm in real life and do any damage or anything like that? Any of these crazy advocate or activists, rather?
No, I've had some fans show up
Oh, that's
unannounced.
cool. Well, I guess unannounced
Is
isn't so
it
much.
is, but I mean, they come to the house, and I have a family, and
Yeah.
so I mean, we have security cameras at the house now. It's definitely changed things, a lot of it for good, but yeah, you always have that worry that it's not going to be a fan the next time. It's going to be
Hmm.
somebody looking to do something they shouldn't. Um, yeah, so that's always a concern. The new facilities have closed circuit cameras throughout the whole thing because I will be right next to the highway. So um, I am taking every precaution. Um, I am also I live in rural Oregon in the United States, a strong Second Amendment uh, advocate. So it's not a good idea.
Yeah.
It's
Leave it
just
at that.
not.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you were living at your farm essentially. Your house is there. Now with the new facility, does that mean you have some separation
No, it's
from
actually closer because
oh,
yeah, because my house is about 150 yards away from the new facilities, and so yeah, it's less separation. And one of the stipulations Casey, my wife, had if I build my visitor center is we had to have a house off farm where it's
smart.
not as yeah. I couldn't even argue with her. I said okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we found a nice little 4 acre spot where I can build her horse arena and her horse barn and build her house. And then once that's done, I can build my visitor center. So
That's cool. That's cool, man. Yeah, it's something that we talk about with being more public and having my show and the social media and everything. And we live in a small town. It's not that hard to find us, right? And so
right,
talking about that with my wife and considering our daughter's safety and hopefully we'll have more children. It's a very real conversation you have to have these days. And
absolutely.
we've talked
But
about
the
getting
but the
a
good side of being in a small town, I almost guarantee if somebody came into town looking for me, I would know they were looking for me before
100%.
they ever found
Yep.
me.
Yeah,
But yeah,
100%.
Casey and I have had the same conversations about our daughters. Um, how much because everybody loves the videos of them playing and learning and being around the cows, but eventually I'm going to phase them off of my social channels
Same.
because they will deserve to have their privacy, and I don't want people to recognize them as they get older.
Yeah.
From because I go, if I'm over in Portland area or out in the Willamette Valley, I'll have people actually recognize me, and it's still weird to me. I'm a dairy
Hmm.
farmer. It's not like I'm some celebrity, but they get excited to see me, and it's just weird.
It is, man, and it's happened with me. Uh, small town, definitely in town, like a lot, but then outside of town a few times, and it's the weirdest thing to me is it's an odd dynamic because here is someone who basically like knows everything about you and you don't know them. And so people
At
will
all.
come up, right? And they're like, "How's Carter?" And I'm like, "Oh man, this is so weird." Like, my daughter's name but of course you do because I put it out there.
Yeah.
But that's another conversation we've had is I'm going to phase her out now that she's 5, she's in school and already it's like, teachers and stuff know who I am. They know she's my daughter, and I don't want to create any friction for her
Right.
from my
Yeah.
stuff. And so I'm definitely going to do that. And I already barely show my wife because she has a corporate gig and I am
Yeah.
controversial, uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
political
And my
slash
wife is
cultural.
very private, so you barely ever see her on there
Yeah.
on my social channels, and everybody always asks, and I'm like, because I respect my wife's right to not be on here because she doesn't want everybody knowing who she is.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly, man. It's an interesting thing, and I think a lot of I guess you would call it creators or whatever are starting to get a taste of that, where it's like, oh, holy shit, this has implications in my real life also. Like the
Yeah.
weirdest one for me was probably, I go back and forth to St. Louis maybe a handful of times a year because of stuff with First Form and stuff
Yeah.
like that, and a guy in the airport recognized me and like ran up with his phone on FaceTime and like shoved it in my face and wanted me to talk to his buddy just right there. And I'm like, I'm like really like, what is
Yeah.
going on here, man? This is so weird. But he's like, dude, my friend wants to talk to you. And it's like, so one thing I would say to people is like, I understand you follow people for quite a while and you feel like you know them and you're excited when you see them, but you have to like, don't just like bum rush them in public. Like,
Right. There's
I'm happy.
there's a correct way to do it.
Right, right. And it's like, it's wild. I can't imagine being an actual celebrity, like
Oh
someone who
yeah.
can't even go to the store, you know?
It's given you me a much healthier respect for what they go through on a daily
Hmm.
basis. I mean, anybody that is even halfway sane that is at that level obviously has a much better grasp of who they are than most people do. Because
Yeah.
to put up with all that they do online is just insane.
Well, it makes a lot of sense when you hear all these stories like, yeah, I saw whoever in public. He was such an asshole. And it's like, well, maybe he wasn't an asshole. Maybe you just caught him at a time when he's trying to like take his daughter to get ice cream or something. And he's
Uh-huh.
just like, and he's trying to be nice, but you're all up in his face. And it gives you, like you said, a better appreciation for that kind of stuff. And,
Hmm.
it's really, I think social media has really affected people's ability to interact with people in real life as well, especially young people. They
Yeah.
can't make eye contact. They speak differently. It's like everything's in shorthand, and it's very odd. I don't know if that's something you've noticed out there, but it's
Yeah,
weird.
I have. And then I've also noticed, like, a lot of people don't know that I have two older children that I have 50% custody over. My
Mm.
son texted me at 1:30 the other night to let me know that he was sick and he was maybe not going to make it to school. And I'm just like, why are you letting me know that? The, you could have waited until normal hours to, I didn't need an update on your life at
Yeah,
1:30 in the morning.
yeah,
Um, yeah, it's just
that's true. There is a lot of like everything is real time now because I remember I'm in my mid 30s. I think we're close in age, right? How old are
yeah,
you?
I just hit 40. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Well, so I mean, 5 years apart. Growing up in the '90s, like you would go. I mean, no cell phones, no nothing. It's just like you wouldn't
Hmm.
see somebody for a few days, and that was normal. You didn't worry about them. And then you run into them again, or they give you a call on your home phone or whatever, and it's just like, hey, catch me up on your life. But these days, it's like everybody's providing constant updates all the time.
Right. I mean, I remember being excited to go back to school because you hadn't seen your friends all summer, some of your
Exactly. That's a
friends.
perfect example. Yeah.
And now you know exactly what they're doing. So there's no excitement, I don't think, to go back to school or any of that stuff. I
We
mean,
have our
Mondays
20
were
year
exciting.
class reunion coming up, our 20-year class reunion, and nobody really gives a shit because everybody's kept up with everybody on Facebook or Instagram or whatever. It's
Yeah.
totally different these days. And I really don't want to see them anyway. So,
Yeah, that's kind of how I felt too.
yeah. Um, all right. So let me try to get on track here a little more. What is, as someone who is a farmer in America and obviously directly plugged into the food supply that feeds us, inflation is
Ugh.
ridiculous. Gas prices, obviously. I mean, there's a whole host of things. What has been the biggest issue from your perspective that we've faced this past year being a farmer in America?
It would have to be fuel.
Yeah.
Everybody takes it for granted. And right now, you're hearing everybody talk. We have 25 days worth of
Of
diesel left,
diesel. Yeah.
but that's a misnomer. We have 25 days worth of supply, which means we're still producing diesel. So it's not like in 25 days we're going to run out. But obviously, we are using more than we are producing at the moment. So they probably might want to bump up the diesel production.
Hmm.
Um, but it's sitting, and it has been sitting at $6 here in on the Oregon coast and all throughout the western United States. That just hauling and everything. My diesel bill or my fuel bill for this farm went from right at 6,000 a month up. It is 12 to $15,000 a month now,
Wow. So it's at
and
least
that's
doubled.
just yeah, that's just on farm. That's not counting all the transportation for to get products to stores. It is just a compounding issue that is it's going to destroy the distribution, and that's driving a lot of inflation. I mean, because fuel also not fuel, but fertilizers, things like that. That is all tied to the oil and natural gas industry. So unless you're using cow manure, um, so it all is tied together, and um, we're seeing total inflation on farms somewhere between 30 and 50%. It's just been
Wow. Dude.
astronomical. With the caveat that yes, we are also seeing higher um, commodity prices for dairy, beef, corn, wheat. All that is also up, but it's like more in and more out. It's break even still, but
Sure.
so yeah, it's been a wild ride. But inflation on farm inflation is insane.
Wow. That is crazy, man. I had no
Yeah,
clue that it was that
so the
high.
food them trying to say that inflation is they're trying to get it in control. Uh, Food inflation is it's nowhere near done. It's still got to go up. Otherwise, there'll be nobody left on the farm side to produce the food. Just our fuel costs alone have crippled a lot of it.
That's, man, that is wild. That is, those numbers are insane. And have you seen anything start to trend downward at all with the Inflation Reduction Act in quotes?
No, we're actually seeing an uptick in diesel prices again. So, we had a little bit of a lull, and now it's going
Mm,
back up. Some of it, like some of the commodities, cottonseed dropped down enough that I'm feeding it to my cows again. Few things have dropped back down. They're still uh, so. At one point, cottonseed was, for those of you that are going to ask why I feed cottonseed, it's a great fat source for dairy cattle, which produces higher butter fat, which means my milk is worth more. Anyway, that was a side note.
and the ice cream is
Last
better.
year, we were paying $350 a ton. It got all the way up to 650, and my nutritionist we didn't buy when it got to there. My nutritionist said if it gets back down to $500 a ton with what all the other commodities have done, it works in the ration. So it got back down to there, and I locked in prices, but it's still a 30 something percent higher than it was a year ago at that price.
So, what
Um,
does a ton of cottonseed do in terms of how many cows it feeds for how long? Like,
right now I am feeding right at a ton and a half a day. So
wow.
on 800 cows, the cotton part of the ration is a ton and a half.
So, if you don't mind me asking, in like, what is your like total monthly food cost just for the cows?
It's gotta be carry the one. Just for the cows, it is probably $115,000 a month.
Wow. In
Yeah,
food for the cows.
yeah, yeah. Feed costs alone on a dairy farm. Beef is a little different because a lot of them are out on the range until they go to a feedlot at the end to
Hmm.
put the marbling and the fat on. But on a dairy farm, anywhere between 50 to 70% of your cost is feeding your cows.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. So, but I mean, still, that is wild, man. That's a lot of
Yeah, and
money.
yeah, and right now we're running probably closer to 80% of cost, and it's not sustainable.
And
Uh,
that's all a direct result of higher costs to ship, higher, inflation.
higher shipping costs, rail costs for shipping on rail have gone up, and a lot of people want to blame the unions, but it's actually the rail uh, companies. That's a totally different podcast on that. And I have friends that are conductors and engineers, and the crap they're dealing with those companies is insane. Um, but it's fertilizer costs have gone up, which means corn has gone up, and frankly, what's going on in Ukraine, they are called the breadbasket of Europe. So
Right. That's right.
that that increased all of our commodity prices, wheat, corn, all of that. And Russia is a major exporter of fertilizers and things like that. So you have that side of things. It's just been a fun year.
Yeah. It's always interesting to me when people say that they don't really care about politics because it doesn't really affect their lives. And I'm like, man, you must not be a small business owner. And then I
Yeah.
think, even to the extreme, being a farmer who is a small business owner is, I mean, you're so on the pulse of, like you were saying, commodities and the
Yeah.
different, international relationships between these countries where we bring things in. And I mean, it's wild how much just poor decision making by bureaucrats can affect your ability to make a living.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, I don't, I wish more people understood how quickly the decisions politicians are making affect their food costs
Mm.
in their grocery store. It's a direct relationship. I mean, whether they're doing waters of the United States regulation that where they're trying to regulate all the streams and rivers, and whether it's fertilizer, everything is directly. I'm losing my train of thought here.
No, you're good, man.
It's all directly related to policies that are put in place.
Yeah.
Um,
So if nothing else, people, like you have to concern yourself with this stuff. I mean, it's just, that's one of my big messages, because I've fallen into the trap, I think, of bitching and moaning about politics some here and there. And so I've really tried to make efforts at talking about things you can do, right, to actually make a change. And a lot of what I talk about is obviously around personal development in terms of your physical development and family and everything else. But I truly do believe that being active politically is a big part of that, because you directly impact all of these things that we've talked about for this past hour, man. It's really your responsibility as a citizen to do that stuff.
yeah, and everybody correlates that with you have to be involved in national politics. But
No.
no, local is the
Mm-hmm.
most important
Absolutely.
area. Local, start, local school boards, or even just your PUD, your public utility district,
Mm-hmm.
getting involved in stuff like that, or your water districts. There's so many, and they're all looking and begging for people to get involved. But we are all so busy on social media, it seems like, that we don't take the time to actually get involved in the real world. Um, so then you have these people that have never had a real job, have never ran a business, that go directly into politics and then start making rules and regulations for on things that they've never done.
Yeah. The
Yeah.
big conundrum is that the people that really should be making these decisions are too busy actually building businesses and making things and selling things and improving people's lives, and they don't want to do these jobs.
and
So that
and frankly, they don't want to have the hassle and the hate that comes along with it either,
yeah.
because it doesn't matter what side of the political aisle you're on, you're going to deal with angry, ignorant people that are going to attack you, your family, your livelihood, and that has to stop. And I don't I don't know how we get there, but we're gonna get there. I
Do
have
you
faith.
have political aspirations one day, or that
That is
wasn't
a
an
loaded.
immediate no?
That was a loaded question. My wife and I have talked about these things. If I do, it would be like county commissioner or
Hmm.
something local, because I don't. Once again, I have a business. I have things like that. But as I get older, I'm not going to rule out trying to get more involved.
Hmm.
I've had people approach me about trying for state legislator or something like that, and I'm just like, I don't have the time. I'm in the process of building new facilities. I've got this and that. Um, yeah, but I'm not ruling it out. But at this point in my life, I have other things that are priorities.
Yeah. Well,
Once
that
once all my kids are out of high school, that might be a time where I get more involved too.
well, you're the kind of guy that should. That's the problem, right? You are the type of dude that we need making some of these decisions, especially at local and state level, because you are so connected too to I mean the lifeblood of your state, which is farming, right? And
Mhm.
you have a perspective that many don't. And if you don't, then there's going to be this goober who has never set foot on a farm making decisions that will directly impact people like you, right? That's the big conundrum. So I hope,
It
yeah.
there is that is the conundrum, but I think until I'm ready to do that, the things I am doing, which is try and educate. I hate to use that word though. Trying to show my life online
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
show what I deal with allows me to help that goober that's never been on a farm maybe understand a little more. And so I always like to give the example of, yes, I am very well versed in what I do for a living and farming community and what's going on. But the first time I went to Washington D.C. and tried to figure out that subway system, oh, I
Yeah.
was lost. I was so confused. So just because people don't know farming or agriculture, that doesn't mean that they can't contribute. They can't learn about it. They don't have their unique experiences that they can uh, also bring to the table. Because I would be the last person you would want to be in a city trying to make decisions that are best for a city. Because I don't. Nope. You get me out in a rural environment, and yeah, I can hit the ground running. But trying to manage a city, nope, not
Well,
for me.
that's because you have a level of self awareness that most politicians don't have.
That is also true. Yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
I wish
Look,
more of them had it.
same here, brother. Well, look, dude, we just blew through an hour really quick. It's always an honor and a pleasure speaking with you. I appreciate everything you're doing, and keep up the good fight, man. And I hope the book has been doing well. I really enjoyed it. And with that, where can people find you, the book, all the fun stuff to learn about the life of Derrick Josi and Tillamook and
Yeah,
farming?
you can find me on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at TDF Honest Farming. That's short for Tillamook Dairy Farmer. Um, my book, An Industry Worth Fighting For, is available on Amazon. Eventually, I'm going to get the Audible version out, but I have to find the time to read it myself. So that's still a work in progress. I'm also on LinkedIn, but that's cesspool, so don't
Yes, it
bother.
is. Are you on
Uh,
Twitter?
oh yeah, and at Derrick Josi on Twitter. And I've been a little more active on there now because I think maybe something might come of it. Might
Yeah,
be. Oh, if he brings Vine back or something like that, that could be a viable platform again.
yeah. I think a lot of us are more active on Twitter now with what's been going on. It'll be interesting to see where it goes.
Yeah, I'm expecting to be disappointed.
Well, if you expect that, at least when
Yeah,
you're maybe not, then it'll be that much better, right? So,
exactly.
all right, brother. I know you're a busy man. I appreciate your time. For everybody listening, until next time, keep your minds free.